Right now, inside a quiet museum case in New Delhi, a small bronze figure stands with one hand resting on her hip. She is barely 10 centimeters tall. She was cast more than 4,000 years ago, and metal students still study how she was made. But here is the part almost no channel tells you. The people who cast her ran one of the largest empires of the ancient world. It stretched across more than 1 million square kilometers. It had planned cities, standardized weights, and a metal industry that reached from the open sea to the high mountains. And they built all of it with no kings, no royal palaces, no golden tombs, no throne rooms, no readable records of any ruler at all. An empire of metal run by no one we can name. For years, the internet has told wild stories about these smiths, that they made rust-proof metal, that they knew a secret alloy stronger than modern steel. A few even claim they had electricity. Tonight, we separate the myth from the evidence. And I promise you, the real story is stranger than the myth, because modern science with lasers and laboratories still cannot answer one simple question about these people, a question that sits at the very center of everything they built. Where did they get their tin? That one question hides a mystery that scientists are still arguing over right now, today. Stay with me to the end, and you will understand a lost technology that defied geography itself, and the enigma at its heart that no one has solved. Before we go deeper, a short and honest word. This is a small and simple channel. No sponsors, no company behind it. It grows only through the kindness of people like you. If you love history that respects the evidence, please consider subscribing. A like, a comment, or a share costs nothing, and it helps this channel more than you could know. Thank you for being here. Let us start with a problem that should have made this entire civilization impossible. To see it, you first have to picture their homeland. Imagine wide, flat river plains, rich black farmland fed by great rivers, cities of mud brick and fired brick, laid out on careful grids, with straight streets and covered drains that would shame some modern towns. And that is the trap hidden in the landscape. Those plains hold almost no metal, no copper in the hills, because there are barely any hills, no tin, no gold waiting in the ground. The foundation of a bronze empire simply was not there beneath their feet. So think about what that truly means. Every blade, every axe, every fishhook, every mirror, every ring had to begin somewhere far away. The raw metal had to travel hundreds of kilometers before a single tool could ever be shaped. A modern nation can order metal from across the planet and have it arrive in a day. These people had no engines, no highways, no steel ships. They had rivers, coastlines, pack animals, and their own two legs. And yet, somehow, they built an industry so consistent that tools from cities hundreds of kilometers apart look like they came from a single workshop. The same shapes, the same standards. How do you run a supply chain like that across a land the size of a continent when your own ground gives you nothing? Now here is where the mystery deepens. Because in most ancient empires, a powerful king forces that kind of order. A ruler commands, and the workshops obey. But when we dig through these cities, we find something missing. There is no grand palace towering over the rest. There are no royal tombs stuffed with treasure. There is no monument shouting the name of a god king. The usual center of power is simply absent. Compare that to their neighbors. In Egypt, pyramids rose over the tombs of pharaohs. In Mesopotamia, temples climbed toward the heavens for kings and gods. Their power was loud, and it was carved in stone. The Indus world is silent, and yet its order runs deeper than almost anywhere else. Across the whole civilization, we find the same standardized weights, the same brick proportions, the same tool designs, repeated again and again. And their obsession with sameness ran deeper than tools. They cut small cubes of stone to use as weights, and those weights follow a precise, repeating system. The smallest are tiny. The larger ones climb in exact, regular steps. The same units appear in city after city, hundreds of kilometers apart. A trader weighing copper in one town would balance it against the identical standard used in a town he had never even seen. That is breathtaking control over an economy, with no visible mint and no royal inspector anywhere in sight. So who enforced the standards? Who made sure that a bronze axe in one city matched a bronze axe 500 kilometers away if there was no emperor giving the order? Hold that question. It will haunt the rest of this story. To even begin answering it, we have to do what the metal forces us to do. We have to follow it. And the first trail we follow is copper. Copper was the backbone of everything they made. It was the base of nearly every tool and nearly every weapon. If the flow of copper ever stopped, the workshops would fall silent within weeks. So where did it come from? And here, science gives us a genuine answer through a beautiful piece of detective work. Metal carries a hidden fingerprint. The lead locked inside a piece of copper varies slightly depending on the mine it was born in. Different ore bodies formed at different times, and they leave a subtle signature. By reading that signature in a laboratory, researchers can trace an ancient tool back toward the earth it came from. It is worth pausing on how remarkable that really is. We are reading the birthplace of a metal from atoms locked inside a 4,000-year-old tool. A blade that a smith once hammered in the glow of a furnace can still whisper, faintly, which mountain its copper was torn from. Science has turned these silent objects into witnesses, and slowly, patiently, it is making them talk. Those studies point in two very different directions. One source lay far to the west, across open water, in the land of Oman, on the Arabian Peninsula. The ancient records of Mesopotamia called that copper land Magan. Boats hauled heavy metal ingots across the Arabian Sea to the coastal cities of the Indus. And those sea crossings were no small feat. The boats rode the seasonal winds across open water, likely built from bundled reeds or timber, riding low under the weight of raw metal. Along the route lay trading islands in the Gulf that served as ancient way stations, where goods from many lands changed hands. This was a working ocean highway, moving heavy cargo between distant shores long before the empires we usually credit with such reach. The other source lay inland, to the east, in the copper-rich hills of Rajasthan in northwestern India. There, caravans loaded ore and metal and moved it slowly overland toward the great river cities. Copper was the workhorse, but it was not the only metal they chased. Gold came up from the far south of India and from the wider trade world to the north. Silver arrived from the direction of Afghanistan and Iran. They also used lead, both to help certain castings flow and to weigh down their plumb lines. Every one of these metals, just like copper, had to be carried in from somewhere beyond the plains. Nothing precious grew in their own soil. So the picture that emerges is not a single road. It is two arteries, pulling metal from opposite ends of the world and feeding one civilization in the middle. The coastal cities leaned toward the sea and toward Oman. The inland cities leaned toward the hills of Rajasthan. And to the far north, they reached even further. Deep in a rugged corner of Afghanistan, the Indus people planted a distant outpost called Shortugai. It sat near sources of precious blue stone and near metal country. A tiny colony, thousands of kilometers from home, set up like a foothold to secure rare materials at the source. Think about the reach of that. This was a network that touched the coast of Oman, the hills of India, and the mountains of Afghanistan, all feeding a single hungry industry. But copper was the easy problem. Copper, at least, they could find. Because there was a second metal they needed, a rarer one. And the hunt for it becomes the deepest mystery in this entire story. We will get there. But first, let us step inside the fire. Let us walk into a Bronze Age workshop and forget every clean, cold image of a modern factory. The first thing that hits you is heat. A pit or a low furnace lined with clay, packed with glowing charcoal, burning far hotter than any cooking fire. To reach the temperature that melts copper, they forced air into the flames through clay nozzles, driven by hand pumps or foot-worked bellows. Then come the sounds, the steady hiss of forced air, the crack and settle of burning charcoal, the push and wheeze of the bellows, over and over, for hours. This was hot, loud, relentless work. And then the smell, which is the part we always forget. The sharp bite of hot metal and smoke, trapped inside a small enclosed room. Sweat, charcoal, and something faintly metallic hanging in the air that the workers could taste. At the heart of it sat the crucible, a small, thick clay cup, holding a pool of molten metal that glowed like a fallen piece of the sun. When the moment was right, a worker lifted that liquid fire and poured it, steady and sure, into a waiting mold. Now remember what they did not have. No thermometer, no gauge, no dial to read the temperature. The smith judged the heat entirely by the color of the flame and the behavior of the metal itself. That knowledge lived in the body, learned across a lifetime, and passed from master to apprentice. And these workshops were not scattered at random. Certain cities became true industrial centers, each with its own character and its own specialty. Walk through a few of them, and the scale of this world starts to come alive. At the greatest of the river cities, in the very heart of the civilization, excavators found copper smelting installations, crucibles crusted with slag, and a wealth of metal vessels, blades, and razors. This was a place of scale, where the everyday tools of an empire were shaped, worn out, and shaped again. At another great northern city, they uncovered brick-lined furnaces sunk into the ground, copper-working floors, and heaps of slag left from melting and mixing metal. The evidence there speaks of steady, repeated production, day after day, season after season. But one smaller site stands out as something close to a factory town. It was a dense hive of crafts, packed with tiny drill bits, fine saws, and the endless debris of metalworking and bead-making. If any place in this world was a dedicated workshop city, it was here. And on the coast, beside the sea trade, sat a city with its own bead factory and a metal casting area, lined with rows of clay crucibles. Nearby lay a great brick basin that some researchers read as an ancient dock, a place where the metal of distant lands may have first come ashore. Here is a detail that surprises almost everyone. For all their skill with metal, these people never fully let go of stone. Sharp blades of chert and flint were still made and used across the cities, right beside the bronze. Metal was precious and endlessly recycled, so stone stayed useful for ordinary cutting. It is a strange picture, a sophisticated bronze economy that still leaned on the tools of the Stone Age, and it shows just how careful they had to be with every scrap of metal they owned. But this craft carried a hidden price, paid in blood and breath. In the earlier ages, they often worked with copper mixed with arsenic. The arsenic made the metal harder and easier to cast. And here lies a quiet horror. Heated arsenic releases toxic fumes. These smiths may have breathed poison for years. Some researchers wonder whether the old legends of lame or sickly metalworkers, found across many ancient cultures, echo the real damage that this invisible poison did to their bodies. They mastered several ways to shape the metal. Simple open molds for flat blades and bars. Two-part molds carved in stone or clay for tools they wanted to reproduce exactly, again and again. And for their masterpieces, they used a method so clever it still amazes us. But we will come back to that. Because before the masterpieces, we have to talk about the recipe. And the recipe hides a genuine shock. Here is what almost everyone assumes. You hear the words Bronze Empire, and you picture every object as a carefully mixed bronze. You imagine a civilization of expert chemists hitting the perfect formula every single time. The evidence tells a stranger story. When researchers analyzed large numbers of their copper objects, they found something that stops you cold. Around 70% of them were not bronze at all. They were plain, unalloyed copper. And in many of the pieces that did contain arsenic or tin, that extra metal was not added on purpose. It rode in by accident, hidden inside the original ore. In other words, some of their earliest bronze may have been a happy accident, long before it was ever a deliberate choice. So which were they? Master alloy engineers, or lucky beginners who stumbled into greatness? The honest answer sits in between, and it changes across time. In the earliest phases, much of the mixing looks accidental and messy. But by the peak of the civilization, something shifts. In that mature period, the tin content in their finest tools tightens into a narrow band, right around 10 to 12%. And that is exactly the range a modern engineer would choose for a strong, castable bronze. That kind of consistency is very hard to explain as luck. It suggests real control. It suggests smiths who had learned, by hand and by eye, exactly how much tin made the best blade. They could not measure a percentage. They had no way to read the chemistry. And yet, through pure trial, memory, and inherited skill, They closed in on the same sweet spot that science would only confirm thousands of years later. That is not magic. It is something better. It is mastery earned the hard way. And with that mastery, they made objects that still stop us in our tracks. Let us finally look at the masterpieces. We return to where we began, to that small bronze figure in New Delhi. She stands relaxed and certain, one hand on her hip, chin slightly raised, as if she has all the time in the world and knows it. She was made using the lost wax method. First, the artist shaped the figure in wax. Then they wrapped it in clay and heated the whole thing so the wax melted and drained away. That left a hollow clay mold in the exact shape of the figure. Into that hollow, they poured molten metal. And when the metal cooled and the clay was cracked open, the figure was born. Here is the crucial part. That method destroys its own mold every single time. So she is not stamped out on a press. She is not one of 1,000 identical copies. She is a single, unrepeatable object, shaped by one hand 40 centuries ago, by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. There will never be another one like her. But this was not only a civilization of art, it was a civilization of tools that worked, and those tools reveal a quiet genius. Look closely at their saws. Some of their saw blades had teeth that were deliberately bent, set slightly to alternating sides. That is not a mistake, and it is not decoration. A saw with set teeth cuts a path slightly wider than the blade itself, so the metal does not jam and bind as it moves through the cut. That is a real engineering principle, and they were using it in the Bronze Age. Look at their razors, with graceful double-curved blades and tangs to fit a handle. Look at their fishhooks, barbed and curved to hold a struggling catch. Look at their flat axes, produced in standard shapes over and over, like a modern product line. Some researchers even credit these smiths with early forms of the true saw and the needle with an eye. And look at the drills from their coastal workshops, fine enough to bore clean holes through hard stone beads, smaller than a grain of rice. This is not a people fumbling with metal. This is confident, practical, precise engineering, thousands of years before we would give it a name. And they could join metal, not only shape it. They fastened pieces together with rivets and clever overlaps. For their finest jewelry and most delicate work, there are even signs they could fuse small parts with heat. Every one of these skills points the same direction, toward patient specialists who understood their material in their bones, and who had the time and the standing to perfect it. But every one of these objects, every blade and every bead, depended on one thing. To make true bronze, consistently, they needed a steady supply of tin. And tin is where this entire story turns into a mystery that has never been solved. So let us finally face it. This is the puzzle that has haunted researchers for generations. This is the heart of everything. First, understand why tin mattered so much. Tin is the great multiplier of the Bronze Age. Add a small amount of it to copper, and everything improves at once. The metal flows more smoothly into molds. It grows harder. It takes and holds a sharper edge. Copper plus tin gives you bronze, and bronze is what raises a village into an empire. Part of what makes tin so precious is where it chooses to hide. Tin ore forms only in certain unusual rock settings, tied to particular kinds of granite. Most regions on Earth simply do not have it, so a Bronze Age people did not just need trade. They needed access to one of only a handful of blessed spots on the whole map, and then a way to move that metal across everything in between. That scarcity is exactly why tin shaped the ancient world so powerfully, and why it could make or break a civilization. Now here is the problem that should not exist. Tin is one of the rarest resources in the entire region. For a very long time, geologists insisted there was no meaningful tin anywhere in the Indus lands at all. None. So sit with the impossibility of that. A civilization that mastered bronze. A civilization that poured tin into thousands of tools with careful control. And it sat on top of a land that, as far as anyone could tell, contained no tin to give. For decades, the standard answer was simple. They must have imported every single gram of it from far away. And the fingers pointed north and west, to the mountains of Afghanistan, and beyond them into Central Asia, to the distant valleys of what is now Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Remember that lonely outpost at Shortugai in the mountains of Afghanistan? Suddenly, it looks less like a trading post and more like a listening station on a resource frontier, a foothold planted exactly where the rare metals and stones were born. And there is a wider clue, too. The records of ancient Mesopotamia speak of a distant, wealthy land they traded with, a source of exotic goods which they called Meluha. Most scholars believe Meluha was this very civilization, so these people were not isolated. They were plugged into a metals and trade web that stretched from the Indus all the way to the cities of Mesopotamia. To the scribes of the West, this was a land of wonders, a distant source of exotic goods, of carnelian beads, rare woods, ivory, and metal. Imagine your entire civilization known, far away, mainly through its luxury exports and its craftsmanship. These smiths and traders were not living at the ragged edge of the world. In the eyes of the great cities beyond the sea, they were a rich and mysterious partner, glimpsed only through the beautiful things they made. For a long time, that seemed to settle the tin question. The tin came from the far mountains, carried across brutal terrain by traders whose names are lost forever. Case closed, or so everyone thought. But some researchers were never fully satisfied. The imported tin idea had a weak spot. If every single gram came from thousands of kilometers away across mountains and deserts, why does the bronze never seem to run short? Why does it appear so steadily, in city after city, for century after century? A thin trickle from the distant mountains is one thing. What the cities show looks more like a flood, and a flood needs a bigger, closer source. Because then the ground itself began to argue back. In recent years, a discovery inside India started to crack the old story wide open, and the details are almost too perfect to believe. The place is called Khanak, in the Tosham Hills of Haryana, in northwestern India. And listen to what came out of that ground. In the rock around Khanak, geologists identified cassiterite. Cassiterite is the natural mineral form of tin ore. This was tin, sitting in the earth, right in the middle of Indus territory. Then the archaeologists began to dig, and they pulled out tin slag, the waste crust left behind when tin is smelted. They found fragments of furnaces, they found crucibles, they found bronze objects. This was not simply a hill with tin in it. This looked like a place where tin was actually being worked. And now the detail that raises the hair on your arms. The name of the village, Khanak. In the local tongue, that word means miners, a settlement of miners sitting on a tin-bearing hill in the beating heart of the Bronze Age world. A name that may be a memory older than history. So which is the truth? Did the Indus tin travel from the far valleys of Central Asia, hauled across half a continent by forgotten hands? Or did some of it come from a quiet, overlooked hill inside India itself? Right now, honestly, we still do not know for certain. And think about what a real answer would mean. If the tin truly came from Central Asia, then this civilization ran one of the longest and most demanding supply lines in the entire ancient world, moving a rare metal across mountains and deserts for centuries without breaking. If instead it came from within India, then we have badly underestimated what these people could find and mine in their own backyard. Either answer rewrites the map of the Bronze Age, and we still cannot choose between them. The Khanak finds are real, but they are still being studied and debated. Some see clear proof of local tin mining. Others urge caution and want more evidence before rewriting the maps. The argument is alive, and it is happening in scientific papers right now. And there is a deeper reason this mystery refuses to close. It is almost poetic. These people recycled their metal obsessively. Old and broken tools were melted down and remade again and again and again. And here is the cruel twist. Every time metal is melted and mixed with other metal, its chemical fingerprint blurs. The unique signature that would tell us where the tin was born gets smeared and averaged away. The very recycling that kept their economy alive is the thing that erased the evidence we now need. So understand what this means. The Great Tin Mystery is not a solved puzzle from an old textbook. It is a live, scientific argument unfolding today about a civilization that hid its own tracks 4,000 years ago. And that, to me, is far more thrilling than any myth about aliens or secret formulas. If a mystery like this is exactly why you love real history, this is the moment to subscribe. It truly helps this small channel dig into stories the big channels skip. Now, let us follow that mystery to one of its strangest objects. Travel south. More than 1,000 kilometers from the great Indus cities, far down into the Indian peninsula, a farmer once uncovered something buried in the earth. A hidden group of heavy bronze figures. A chariot pulled by oxen, with a driver standing tall upon it. An elephant, a rhinoceros, a water buffalo. Solid, heavy, powerful, and strikingly made. This is the famous Daimabad hoard, and it opens a mystery of its own. For years, scholars fought over when these bronzes were even made. Today, most agree they belong to the final chapter of this civilization, its late phase. But that agreement only sharpens a stranger question that will not go away. Were these figures cast right there in the deep south? Or were they made far to the north, in the Indus heartland, and then carried more than 1,000 kilometers across the subcontinent to the place they were found? The clue, once again, is chemistry. The metal in these figures contains arsenic. Arsenic is common in the copper of the northern Indus region, but down in the south, there was no obvious local copper source that could explain it. That quietly points a finger back toward the distant north. And yet other researchers note something odd in the other direction. The tin in these particular bronzes is strangely low, which some read as a sign that they do not fit the northern pattern at all. So the hoard just sits there, beautiful and stubborn, refusing to confess. Made at home in the south, or carried in secret across a subcontinent by people we cannot see? The debate is real, and it is not finished. Every mystery in this civilization, it seems, leads to another, which brings us, at last, to the wild claims we promised to test. Because now we have seen enough real evidence to face the internet myths honestly, one by one. And these stories travel far. Claim 1. They possessed rust-proof metal, a secret coating that stopped all corrosion forever. The evidence says no. Their copper and bronze objects show heavy corrosion and green crust, exactly like other ancient metals. Whether a piece survives in good condition depends mostly on the soil it was buried in, not on any lost secret. Claim 2. They used a mystery superalloy, stronger than modern steel. The evidence says no. Careful laboratory analysis shows ordinary Bronze Age materials, tin bronze, arsenical copper, leaded copper, remarkable for their age, yes. Beyond modern metal, no. Claim 3. They had electricity, ancient batteries, and electroplating. There is no evidence of any electrical device anywhere in this civilization. None at all. This claim is pure invention, built on nothing. Claim 4. The famous bronze figure was mass-produced by industrial stamping. No. As we saw, she was made by the lost wax method, which destroys its mold every time. She is unique by the very nature of how she was born. Claim 5, and this one spreads the most. People link this civilization to the famous rust-resistant iron pillar that stands in Delhi, but that pillar was forged in a much later era, more than 2,000 years after these ancient cities faded away. A gulf of time separates them. They are simply not connected. And there is a cousin of that claim about the legendary Indian steel that later amazed the world. That special steel also belongs to a later age and to the south of India centuries after these cities were gone. It was not born here. Now the biggest claim of all, the one in 100 thumbnails, that this ancient metalwork surpasses modern technology. Let us be completely honest and clear. It does not. Modern science commands precise chemistry, powerful electric furnaces, titanium, advanced steel, and instruments that measure every atom. No ancient bronze beats that. It is not close. But that comparison misses the real wonder entirely. The wonder was never that they beat us. The wonder is how staggeringly far they got without a single one of our tools. No thermometers, no chemistry, no electricity, no written science at all. Just fire, clay, muscle, memory, and 100 generations of patient, inherited skill. Seen that way, their achievement is not small. It is breathtaking. The truth is far more impressive than the fantasy ever was. So if this civilization was so brilliant, so organized, so skilled with metal, then we are left with the hardest question of all. What happened to it? Where did it go? Because this world did not last forever. Over generations, the great cities lost their shine. Streets that once bustled grew quiet. The grand, ordered system of standardized weights and long-distance trade slowly came apart at the seams. For a long time, people told a violent tale of invasion. They imagined fierce outsiders sweeping in and wiping out the metalworkers and their knowledge in a single bloody stroke. It is a dramatic story, but the evidence does not support it. The deeper cause looks slower, quieter, and in its own way sadder. The climate shifted, the seasonal rains weakened over centuries. Rivers that had cradled these cities changed their courses, or dwindled, or dried entirely. When the water that built the civilization failed, the tightly linked network could not hold. But here is the crucial point for our story, the point about the metal itself. The knowledge did not vanish, it transformed. In the final phase, we see fewer grand workshops and far more make-do survival. Tools were worn down to stubs, repaired, and melted for reuse. People gathered every scrap of metal they could find and made it live again. Hoards of broken bronze, saved like treasure, appear in the ground. These late hoards tell a quiet, human story. Someone gathered every broken tool and stray lump of metal, wrapped them, and buried them for safekeeping. Metal had become too valuable to waste and too tempting to leave lying around. In the glory of the old cities, bronze had been everywhere. In their long twilight, it was treasure worth hiding in the earth. Picture that quiet resilience. A family melting down an ancestor's broken blade to cast something new, because the old trade routes had thinned and metal had become precious again. The great industry did not die in fire. It scattered and it went home, into smaller and smaller hands. And one strange gap remains at the end. Through all their bronze brilliance, iron never truly took hold here. The very metal that would define the next great age barely appears in their world. Why iron failed to catch on in a civilization so gifted with metal is yet another question with no clean answer. Some suspect the answer is simple. Their bronze system worked so well and was so deeply rooted that there was little pressure to master a difficult new metal. Iron demands higher heat and different skills. Others think the knowledge of iron was only arriving just as the cities themselves were failing, so it never had the chance to take root. Whatever the truth, the people who did so much with copper and bronze left the age of iron for others to open. So let us come back, one last time, to that small bronze figure in the museum case, and give her people an honest final verdict. They built a vast, connected world of metal across more than 1 million square kilometers. They did it standing on land that offered them almost no metal at all. They pulled copper across open seas and down from distant hills. They chased tin across mountains, and maybe, just maybe, mined it in quiet valleys we are only now learning to see. They mastered the lost wax method. They engineered saws that would not bind. They found the ideal recipe for bronze by feel alone, with no chemistry to guide them. And they held the whole system together without a single king barking orders, bound instead by shared standards, trust, and cooperation across a continent. They were not gods. They were not aliens. They did not surpass modern science. They were something far more moving than any of that. They were human beings, standing at the very edge of what fire and skill alone could do, and defying the geography that should have stopped them cold. And their greatest secrets are still locked away. Where exactly did their tin come from? Who organized this enormous machine, if not a king? What was life truly like for the smith who stood breathing poison beside the furnace, hour after hour, to make a civilization possible? We still do not fully know. And perhaps that unfinished mystery is the most honest tribute we can offer them. Not a fantasy of secret supermetals, but a real, open question, kept alive by real evidence, about real people who did the impossible with their hands. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. If this story meant something to you, the kindest thing you can do is simple. Subscribe to follow more careful history that respects the truth. Leave a like so more people can find this video. Drop a comment with your own thoughts, because I read them and I answer. And share it with one person who would love this story too. This is a small and simple channel, with no sponsors and no company behind it. Your support is the only reason it can keep going. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one.